I've got ways of making you talk. Because the fact that I gagged you would cause me to have an existential crisis if I heard your opinion. Just flick your truth at me. Rude. Okay, now both of you. You are not coming out until you tell me the truth. Bye-bye. Oh, hello. I was just preparing for a small role in a Broadway musical. It's not much, but it's a start. Anyway. Something's shifty around here, so it's time for a first, fresh, and only installment of Socky's People. Snowdrake, known as Snowy to his friends and family, a teenager abandoned by society. As a runaway from his home in Hotland where his father is, he lives by himself in the Snowden woods, alone, with no one but pretty much everyone except his father for company. Here he holds hostage most passerbys, with puns and probably weaponry. He claims no lands, holds no titles, and inherits no bitches. He is a victim of the ever-present and increasing apathy and malaise society holds towards each other and progress. In a shrinking world where the cramped conditions of the underground cause monsters to despair, he hurts gift trot for fun with his friends, and who can blame him? But ever tragic as Snowdrake's life is, he is yet to learn how abysmal it will soon appear. His mother, dear viewer, has become the pawn of a mad scientist's sick game. His mother fell down some time ago, and that was the catalyst for him to finally leave home, and his father's ever-judgmental ribbings of Snowdrake's puns. Snowdrake's mum's body was, presumably, taken to the Royal Scientist Lab, and they await the return of her dust or body. Wait 1 second. Taken to the lab, and what are they expecting? Some time ago. Some time ago? Wait, what the fuck? Okay, so the photo attached to Gift Trot's horns that the player can remove in the battle with Gift Trot, as it was put there as a prank to further hurt Gift Trot, is that of a, quote, a childhood photograph of Snowdrake and his parent. Parent. Uno. 1. This implies that Snowdrake had only one parent at the time the photo was taken, and, as we know by the end of Undertale, Snowdrake's mother has already fallen down and been injected with determination in Alfie's lab. So that must mean Snowdrake's father is in the photo, as his mother was indisposed, right? Remember, in terms of lore, Snowdrake's father hated the puns Snowdrake would tell, yet his mother, according to her reaction to the puns that we say to her in the True Lab, probably liked them. Snowdrake hated his father's disapproval of his puns, and when his mother was out of the picture, he eventually couldn't stand being at home anymore with just his father, and he ran away. His father, at least since the beginning of the game, though maybe a lot earlier than that, hasn't seen him since. That is until the prologue, obviously, when they are reunited. Now obviously, some of you may be thinking that that was his mum in the picture and that I'm completely wrong. What I reckon doesn't prove anything, that's true. I understand, and there's more details to come, but I doubt Snowdrake would use a picture of himself as a child and his mother as an item to prank Gift Trot with so flippantly. I reckon he'd cherish it, as after all, Snowdrake's mum was the only one to laugh at his jokes. He loved his mum and hates his dad, so I reckon that's a photo of him and his dad that he used to torment Giftdrop with, as it's easier for him to part with. But what am I getting at if that is his father in the photo that's on Giftdrop? Why am I talking about all of this? Well, you see, the problem I have is, when did Snowdrake's mother fall down? When did any of the amalgamates fall down? You see, falling down is a state monsters enter when they're about to die, a comatose state, and they have, presumably only recently, been taken to Alfie's lab to be experimented on with determination. But then I became transfixed. When is recently? Who has family in the lab? How long has Alfie's been the royal scientist? If we assume that Alfie's experimenting and the amalgam's existence is only a recent phenomenon, as in a few weeks or maybe a few months before the game started, then all the amalgams and their constituent monsters would have all had to have fallen down recently. You see, according to Monster History Part 6, a secret Monster History book that wasn't added to the main game but can be found in the game's code, a monster who has fallen down will soon perish. Soon perish. That sounds like a very small window of opportunity to get determination into a monster's body that has fallen down if it will soon perish. Soon is the time frame that we are working within, and soon doesn't sound like very long. So if no one else, Snowdrake's mum must have fallen down relatively recently if her body is now an amalgam, right? But what does that mean if the photo on Giftdrop was a photo of Snowdrake and his dad when Snowdrake was a child? His dad was his sole parent, meaning his mum must have already fallen down. Remember, it's described as a childhood photo, and during Undertale, Snowdrake is described as a teen, a marked difference. And to add to that, what are these letters that sit on Alfie's drawers, all unopened, all from a variety of monsters? The monsters we know for sure who sent letters are Frogget, Snowy and Doggo, but aside from Doggo, Frogget has been trapped in the ruins for, as I've speculated previously, possibly hundreds of years with the Queen, and Snowdrake, aka Snowy, has run away from home and is living in the forest of Snowdon with no home. How is he expecting a letter in response to his own if he has no postal address? And when was his letter sent? Only Doggo exists as a monster that would actually be able to receive a letter in response. Backtracking a bit, to talk about Snowdrake's situation briefly. Again, Snowdrake ran away from home because he couldn't stand being there anymore. This happened when Snowdrake was a child, supposing by the one-parent photo on Giftdrop. His father hasn't seen him since, according to his father. Now, Chilldrake, Snowdrake's friend, says that he and the other teens of the forest live off the box lunches their parents bring them every day, except for Snowdrake, who has to be given food from his friends. That means Snowdrake's father doesn't make him any food, and that implies, aside from his father not knowing where Snowdrake is, that Chilldrake and his cohorts have been giving Snowdrake food for some time now, if it's just accepted that Snowdrake will never ever have food brought to them. They know they'll have to share, and his father not knowing where he is means he can't deliver a letter to Snowdrake. Anyway, I'm bringing this up because not only does this all add to the implication that Snowdrake's mother fell down years ago, not recently, adding to the photo being evidence of when Snowdrake's mum would have died, aka when Snowdrake was a child, aka years ago, but also that Snowdrake would not have written that letter to Alfie's recently. That letter was probably from the time that he was still at his home in Hotland with his father and had a postal address to have letters sent back to him in reply. This means that the experiments on Snowdrake's mother must have happened, roughly 6 to 10 years ago now, judging by Snowdrake's age, which means the amalgams, or at least Snowdrake's mum, are not a recent phenomenon. They could have been in the True Lab for years. But what was young Snowdrake and the other monsters expecting from Alphys in general when they gave their dying loved ones to her? Entry 15 says that the monster families were all called and told that their family members would all come home soon. This entry was probably an entry written by Gaster during his experiments. If you don't know what I mean, go watch my previous video. Now, Alphys may have also been put into the same position as Gaster and called the family members of the fallen monsters she had experimented on and told the families that they had recovered and are fine. She states in a later entry that, quote, "Everyone is calling me to ask when everyone is coming home." So we can assume that she told everyone whose family she experimented on that their loved ones are alive again and well. I'm assuming she made these calls before their loved ones started turning into amalgams. But then why has the issue of loved ones returning suddenly just dropped out of the consciousness of all these family members? Why did Snowdrake leave home if he thought his mother was going to return soon? You see these two married dogs, the ones that I believe to be immortal, again watch my other video, they say they are going to visit the doctor as she hasn't been responding to their letters. Letters, they say, are written by Doggo. Doggo then says that he gets the greater dog to write the letters, to which we read the letter, written by the greater dog, which just says bark in a flowery font. That's why the letter in the lab is addressed from Doggo, but is actually written by greater dog on behalf of the married dogs. But ultimately, it's pretty much from all of the dogs, this letter, which makes sense as they all have parents in the True Lab that, unbeknownst to them, have merged into the amalgam endogeny. They are the only monsters with family in the True Lab that we get a hint are even thinking about physically checking to see what the current go is vis-a-vis their now undeadified parents. These two married dogs are the only ones to even seem to care that their loved ones are still alive but haven't been returned yet. And they eventually don't even go to check. You imagine if you were told, I brought your parents back from the brink of death and they're fine, they'll be home soon. You'd have a lot more motivation to find out what's happening with that, right? So why are they so unmotivated to get their relatives back? Not just the dogs, but Snowy, Shire and Frogget and all the other monsters who have relatives in the lab. My theory? How long it's been. To understand what I mean, let's try and piece together a timeline of events so it's visually apparent. So, Brady and Caddy tell us that Alphys was immediately made royal scientist after making Metaton, and presenting Metaton to Asgore as a robot with a soul. They say she was like a big sister to them, and that she's not been seen in forever by anyone. This implies that Alphys has been royal scientist for some time now, and that they were kids, Brady and Caddy, the last time they were with Alphys. This implies that, as they are now teenagers and not kids, it can be assumed that they are around the same age as Snowdrake when Alphys became royal scientist. So, Snowdrake's mother falling down and Alphys becoming royal scientist happened around the same time, presumably. To further prove this end, we can look at when Metaton was made. Metaton's diaries, back when he was a ghost by the name of Habstabluke working in Bluke Farms, explain when he was created. Metaton left after a person from his human fan club made a body for them that they liked to inhabit. This person was Alphys, obviously. Alphys then says to us that she made an entertainment robot named Metaton a long time ago, when we first meet her. Also, Undyne states in a phone call that no one has seen Napstabluke's cousin, referring to Metaton's ghost form Habstabluke, in a long time, implying that Metaton was, again, created a long time ago. So with all that and what we have also discussed previous, we can agree that Alphys has been a royal scientist for a long time. In this case, probably years. Metaton had made it big before Alphys' experiments went haywire. Also, Alphys had befriended Undyne after the experiments had failed and everyone was calling her about their relatives. Habstabluke, as Metaton, made it big and became a superstar a long time ago, as we discussed, and Undyne already seemed to be close friends with Alphys at the game's start, so that places the experiments being done around here-ish. This is when Snowdrake's mum would have fallen down as well. But look at this, however. Before Metaton existed, in his diaries, the first diary Metaton ever had, he talks about Shire and sister falling down. This is before him becoming Metaton and even before his fan club. Before Snowdrake's mother fell down even, Shire and sister had fell down. That doesn't necessarily mean that she fell down years ago. As the diaries state, Metaton, Habstabluke, had invited Shiren to perform with him and his cousin, Nabstabluke, as stated in his first diary. We know that Undyne had been giving Shiren piano lessons leading up to our entrance into Undertale, but one day she just stopped coming to those lessons, presumably because either her sister had fallen down and or Habstabluke had left the farm to become Metaton. I'm actually leaning toward the latter as to the reason for Shiren's lack of attendance to the piano lessons. You see, Shiren seemed to like the idea, according to Habstabluke's diaries, of performing with Habstabluke and Nabstabluke, meaning she still had some ambition and motivation to do things, even with her sister now gone, meaning her total despondency to not practice any performative art would likely be because there was no point to anymore. In this case, Habstabluke disappearing and leaving her alone with an equally shy Nabstabluke. This is how I envision it on a map. But the most severe degree to which a monster's falling down was separated from Alfie's determination experiments is Frogget, though the evidence is very subjective. Unless these Froggets are elsewhere in the underground, or Final Frogget merely signs their letters as just Frogget, this letter by Frogget, if taken at face value, is highly anachronistic. It was sent maybe a century ago. How did they even send the letter? Was the letter meant for Alfie's or him? There is the idea that Final Froggets are the evolved form of a normal Frogget, implying that Final Froggets are just older forms of Froggets, but that implies a lot of time passing since this letter was written by a Frogget of some sort that then became a Final Frogget. So I'm scratching one big scritch on my head. I'm trying to collate all the information. It has to mean something. The monsters that are Shiren and Snowdrake's mother fell down around relatively the same time, just as Alfie's became royal scientists, but what about the other monsters? When did they fall down? And the married dogs? Their parents are alive. Why aren't they doing anything about it? And if Alfie's just became royal scientist as these monsters fell down, how did she discover determination so quickly to save them? I think it's a good idea to put a rest on the when of all these things and look at the what. Let's look at all the amalgams in the True Lab and see what we can see as being interesting or correlatable. First off the block, lemon bread. Made up of the monster Aaron, Moldbig and Shiren's sister, lemon bread is in part a reference to the Gunstar Heroes character of melon bread. Moving outside of that reference though, and collating that with the similarities between our actions with their form, it seems that this amalgam's head is predominantly Moldbig, its body is that of Shiren's sister, and its muscularity that of the monster Aaron. They seemingly are building up to be a kind of slithering humanoid creature. It attacks with what appears to be a face with sharp teeth. Its overworld appearance starts as a save point that grows to look like a gangly man. It is made up entirely of monsters from Waterfall. Interestingly enough, and as an aside, I made a crappy short about this. Shiren's sister is in fact not a fish monster like Shiren. Her sister is in fact much more like Shiren's current agent, the separate monster that sits below Shiren's actual floating fish form. Let me show you. Hapstabluke's diaries, Metaton, say that Shiren's sister has fallen down, and she is no longer there to speak for Shiren, and Shiren has become more reclusive. Now we could assume that the concept of Shiren's sister spoke for Shiren means Shiren's sister was a kind of confidant and carer for Shiren because Shiren is shy and can't speak well with others. But if the duality of meaning is used here in terms of Shiren's sister being an agent speaking for a client, as Shiren is a singer after all, speaking for her could imply Shiren's sister was Shiren's former agent and spoke for her as a mediator in contracts and deals. Shiren may appear to be physically shy, and vocally we never hear a word out of her, but that's because she only ever sings. Shiren, as a monster, may actually be incapable of speech, though in addition, she may also just be shy in general. That means Shiren needed her sister to speak for her literally, as a friend, and as an agent, and as her only mode of communication verbally with others, since she can only sing. Now, once again, look at what happens when we hum at the amalgam containing Shiren's sister. Its body shakes in recognition. This means Lemon Bread's body is predominantly made up of Shiren's sister, or controlled by it. Now look at the amalgam's body and compare it to Shiren's current agent. They are nearly exactly the same. It could be a universal rule that these types of monsters, agents in this case, are basically the symbiotic mouthpieces of the Shiren monster. This also may imply that Shiren's agent may be another one of her siblings. But moving on. We come to Reaper Bird, whose initial name is not Reaper Bird, but a singular comma. Reaper Bird is comprised of Whimsalot, Astigmatism, and Final Frogget. It appears to be a skinny bipedal avine, like Big Bird from Sesame Street if they had gotten into fentanyl. It attacks us with a curious little tubby creature known as Everyman according to Toby. Its overworld sprite starts as a fake exclamation bubble above our heads and morphs into what looks like a kind of banshee bird horror thing. Actually, it kind of looks like the head that hangs over the Chimera factory in Mother 3, one of Toby's major inspirations for Undertale, and especially the True Lab. The Chimera laboratory, by the way, in Mother 3, pumps out these Chimera things, amalgamations of cyborgs and multiple different animals that have been combined together. That's the thematic correlation between it and the True Lab. In fact, and spoilers here, the laboratory in Mother 3 is itself a chimera that makes other chimeras. Interesting. Did you know that the walls of the True Lab were originally going to laugh at you, according to Toby in the art book, with human faces? Reaper Bird is made up entirely from monsters that inhabit the core. Next! Memory Head, while its general personality motif seems to be that of our cell phone, has faces stemming from the blob that makes up most of its form, and a kind of spine-like tail that protrudes from its back. Its attack is that of a freakish face that balloons towards us, called Freak Face. Its overall appearance is that of a blob with faces that initially pours out of a tap in the surgery room sinks. It is made up of unknown entities. Now, onto Snowdrake's mum. Snowdrake's mum, as an amalgam, looks like Snowdrake, except she seems to be melting, maybe? Forming? Her eyes have been replaced with these faces. According to Snowdrake's dad in the epilogue, his wife is combined with 16 other people. I don't know which people he's talking about, and these people make no impact on her amalgamate form that I can discern. She still looks kind of just like Snowdrake. Wait, he says people, not monsters. She attacks us with pitiful versions of Snowdrake's regular attacks. Her overworld sprite is that of a hulking humanoid creature that originally was disguised as a fridge. Finally, we have Endogyne, known simply as Amalgam in the game. Endogyne is made up, presumably, of all the dog monsters that inhabit the Snowdin Forest. It's the only monster whose form doesn't seem to be morphing any kind of specific monster's attributes and is more just thematically morphing into a dog amalgam. It attacks us with a dog sprite who proceeds to try and destroy us. Its overworld sprite looks similar to that of the battle sprite, just from a side profile, a mutant dog with many legs, though initially it is a floating mass of particles in the fan room that form together to make the aforementioned dog mutant. So, what can be ascertained to be a common theme running through the amalgams? Well, there's a partial inclination towards the humanoid in some aspect of every amalgam except for Endogyne. From either their overworld sprite and or their in-battle attacks and sprites, these amalgams are becoming more human. Also, there's the fact that most of the amalgams are made up of monsters from a specific zone. Lemon Bread is all waterfall monsters, Endogyne is all from Snowdin, Reaper Bird are monsters from the core, and Memory Head and Snowdrake's mother are either from Hotland or the ruins. However, since we know Snowdrake's mum resided in Hotland when she died, we can assume that she is from there, leaving Memory Head from the ruins. 5 amalgams in the True Lab, 5 different regions in the game, 5 different fridges in the cool room, one of them being Snowdrake's mum. It all seems to be too coincidental. Also, Snowdrake's mother seems to be an outlier as an amalgam, as she doesn't seem to be a hybrid of anything. More of a wilting Snowdrake than a mishmash of monsters. A monster mash, if you will. So, Snowdrake's mum is special, right? But what makes a monster normal? What makes up a monster? Well, according to the library in Snowdin, monsters are mostly made of magic with scant physicality. Alphys tells us about this lack of physical matter when we talk to her in the True Lab. The library also tells us that a monster's body is attuned to their souls, as in their soul plays a part in how the body reacts to outside stimuli. This manifests as the monster's defense decreasing if they don't want to fight in general, and a creature with cruel or murderous intentions will hurt them more. Fighting is an emotional display for monsters, as you can see, so if you do enter a fight with a monster, it's not that they are specifically trying to hurt you, it's just that they specifically think that a combative or confronting episode is necessary. So a pacifistic monster with no ill will can be killed easily and will not fight you in a fight. This is why when you can spare enemies in fights, sparing lore-wise is just you saying you don't want to fight, but you attack them instead, they die instantly. It's because they don't want to fight you anymore, yet you attack them treacherously. I won't hurt you on purpose, or if I don't have to or don't feel like it. But in addition to the emotional side of things affecting their stats, we can suppose that a monster's soul affects how they fight. In the library, it states that because humans cannot express themselves through magic, they'll never know what it's like to get a bullet pattern birthday card. The implication here is that attacks we endure during a fight with a monster is, as I've stated, an emotional display by the monster. And that is what is happening. We do see that with a change in a monster's emotions, the makeup of that monster's attack or its pattern will change. Toriel and Azrael's fights being a prime example. Also, judging by how Final Frogget reacts to your compliment in a fight, its attack drops after you compliment it. This implies that the more the monster likes you, the less their attack is going to do to you. This means the more the monster hates you, the more their attack will do. Once again, everything is emotional. So a monster's soul affects their stats and attacks, but then there is the main thing it affects, their body. Though a monster's soul isn't their body, which is of scant physicality, it is deeply attuned to it, and we can see that during dire circumstances, like the fight with Undyne, a soul's determination can change the makeup of a monster. What, you think Undyne just got changed into better armor during the Flash? No, her armor is just a manifestation of her desire to fight and protect her friends. Her armor melts with her when she tries to hold on to life through determination. That ain't armor she's wearing. That's a part of her body melting due to her excess of determination. And though it would take all the monsters in the underground to match the power of one human soul, Undyne mustered up the scant amount of determination within herself somehow to fight us, and thus change her form to a more resolute looking one, matching how she's feeling towards us. This makes her special for some reason. I don't know of any other monster that can do this. Why can Undyne do that? Anyway, the soul and its determination determines, at least in part, how a monster looks. They look like their hopes and dreams. How they feel is a monster's whole deal. A monster manifests malleably in manners most meaningful to monsters, and only a little too much determination can make them melt. Imagine what a lot would do to them. I do have a theory as to why they melt because of determination. You see, while determination has the duality of meaning as I've stated in previous videos, there's determination as in someone's drive to achieve something, and determination as in to reverse termination, aka determinate. But taking the former meaning at face value, if physical matter is given a will or drive to achieve, what would that physical matter do? I don't know, but the melting we see may be the physical matter of the monster, the body, acting independently from the soul, or without guidance from the soul, taking on a different form, as in their body is disobeying the soul as to the form it should take, as it has more determination than the soul, and is now acting independently. As we know, monsters don't always stay melted or keep on melting indefinitely, otherwise all monsters in the True Lab would just be puddles. They eventually become different. They become something new. Why? I'm not telling. I'm just theorising on the how ATM for real no cap. Now, with how the soul affects the monster's body, stats and attacks in mind, let's look at each of the amalgam stats in the game files and see if there's something amiss that differentiates each amalgam, as surely a cacophony of souls mangled together should affect them in this regard, right? So, Lemon Bread, HP 100, Attack 8, Defense 9999. Reaper Bird, HP 100, Attack 9, Defense 9999. Memory Head, HP 100, Attack 9, Defense 999. Endogyny, HP 100, Attack 9, Defense 999. There are some differences there, but there don't seem to be any major differences between each amalgam. And Lemon Bread's slightly lower attack may literally be due to a meta reason of Toby just making their fight a little bit less difficult because maybe it was slightly too hard with the higher damage. Who knows? But an incredibly high defense implies the monsters are determined to fight us for some reason. Especially Reaper Bird and Lemon Bread, who are 10 times more determined to fight us. Anyway, I'm forgetting the main amalgam I'm concerned with here. Snowdrake's mum. HP 400, Attack 0, Defense 0, 0. Remember what the library implies. A lack of defense is a lack of desire to fight, and a lack of attack may imply an inability to harm due to a lack of desire, a lack of cruelty, love for the player, or just a lack of physicality. Now, 0 doesn't mean a complete lack of desire to fight, or an inability to hurt, just that they are apathetic to being in the fight. They'll take it or leave it. As many of the Amalgam's spare dialogues state, they can be spared if they don't care, are contented, have calmed down, etc. They are in a fight with you, but only due to agitation. Calm them down and they leave. Other monsters we meet in game, like Whimslot, Magic, Astigmatism and Temmie, all have negative values for their defense stats, but still fight. Assumedly because they aren't in the fight because they want to be, but simply because they must, though Temmie's canonicity in this is debatable. This makes sense in the case of the monsters I've just mentioned, sans Temmie, because these specific monsters were hired as mercenaries to attack us. They are fighting for money, not because they really want to from an emotional standpoint. During genocide, the monster kid, judging by his defense stat, really doesn't want to be there. Ice, the devolved snowcap, also has a negative defense value, since we've absolutely humiliated them at this point, making them want to leave. However, Snowdrake's mum, along with a different HP stat to everyone else, seems to be a blank slate of a being, only ever really saying snowy in a long drawn out way. Holistically, Snowdrake's mum is an effigy to what Snowdrake's mum was probably like, and if she's an amalgam with multiple other monsters in her, why haven't they affected her form or desires in any way? Her attacks are like Snowdrake's, just misguided and not very well expressed, implying an inability to emote properly perhaps. She seems to have forgotten who she is or what she is, and is only reminded about Snowy in better detail when we punt at her. It's like Snowy was the last thing on her mind before she fell down, and so that's all she can think about. Unlike all the other amalgams, she's just so empty, so cold, like everything that seems to be her is slipping away. She's losing herself. She's gone. It's at this point I'd like to talk about what I think a goner is. A goner, to me, is simple. It's a living vessel, as in something that has the ability to live and think and exist as a possible creature, just without a soul. Not just any creature either. A creature that was or is capable of harbouring said soul, like a monster or a human. Basically, a form or vessel that has determination within it. Nothing drives a goner. No soul is present, hence the namesake. A concept that is along the lines of the determination, refuse, fallen down axis of double meanings Toby is so fond of. But can I prove this? Let's quickly look at the current goners that we know of. We know about Goner Kid, the grey sprite of Monster Kid who seems to be a husk of what a Monster Kid actually is, and he's talking about a bunch of crazy stuff. There's also Clam Goner, a grayscale character from the Xbox and Nintendo Switch versions of Undertale, who gave us a hint as to the coming of Deltarune. Added to this is the palette-relevant Gaster followers, who talk about Gaster and his doings. They aren't called Goners specifically, but because of their grayscale nature, and the upcoming discussion of the Goner Maker and Deltarune, I'll make them honorary Goners. Finally, as mentioned, there's the Goner Maker, a thing that we use at the start of Deltarune, Chapter 1, in which we make a human body that is entirely grayscale. We shape its body, blood, mind, and dreams. Also, special mention to Azrael's attack Hyper Goner, which absorbs everything in the world into them, implying the absorption of all souls in the world. Anyway, what am I getting at? Why am I talking about goners? Well, take a look at entry 14, one I presume to be by Gaster, in which the author states that they thought all of the monsters injected in the True Lab were goners. Remember, the author at this point in the experiment knew that the monsters were going to die. They expected them to die, they just wanted their soul power to break the barrier. So it's not that the author believed that the monsters weren't going to make it, as in, they're going to die and there's little we can do for them. They expected, if not hoped, for the monsters to die. Monsters, as we know, turn to dust when they die. But these monsters were neither dead nor dust. They are walking around as if nothing is wrong. Meaning they show personality and drive and life, as if they had a soul in them. So what did the author mean by, I thought they were goners? Well, as I said, goners all seem devoid of a soul, something that makes them who they are and gives them that spark of life. The Goner Maker alludes to this by describing the figure we create as a vessel and a form in-game. The author of entry 14, in my opinion, thought that the determination they had injected into the bodies of the dying monsters had allowed the soul to die, but the bodies to live, making them goners that were just laying around doing nothing, as husks are wont to do. That was until the body started walking around and talking like nothing was wrong, making them think, oh, I thought they were goners. So in summary, a goner, from both my and possibly the author of Entry 14's standpoint, is a vessel, form or body that is devoid of a soul, but does still live due to determination in its body. Their soul is gone, hence goner. This causes the body to become emotionally stunted and incapable of having a personality. They are alive but empty inside. But in the case of monster bodies at least, as we don't have any human goners that we can compare them to, the monster body's symbiotic relationship and attunement to their soul during their life means that a goner body of a monster still holds some of the essence of that monster's now departed soul. As we know, monster ashes, when they turn to dust after they die, are said to contain the monster's essence and are thus spread across the monster's favourite thing after they die during a monster's funeral. The idea that a monster's dust does have that monster's essence in it proves to be true when the flower that had Azrael's essence spread over it was injected with determination, and that flower woke up with all of Azrael's memories, believing they were Azrael, hence Flowey. So a goner's body must in some respect also retain some of the previous soul's essence within it. This explains why the goners and Gaster followers speak to us when we find them in game and not just stand around blankly like Link's Majora's Mask statue. However, the physical effects on a body who has lost their soul is noticeable. They lose all colour and they become grayscale. And also, maybe, given enough time, a goner will lose all the essence of the soul within them that they just had and become cold and empty. Now Flowey is technically a goner, why aren't they grey? As for why a flower isn't grey, a flower never really begins with a soul to begin with, so assumedly a flower's colour would remain the same as the original flower that was injected with determination. He isn't necessarily a goner, as gone implies a soul was once there but then left. Flowey, the flower, never had a soul. So yeah, that's interesting. Now, let's talk about getting very pregnant. As explained by Gerson, monsters known as boss monsters have their soul energy flow into their child as they age, causing the boss monster to age as their child grows. This is the only way a boss monster can die naturally. But what makes a boss monster a boss monster? Well, from simple observation, and as explained by the ancient glyphs, the only thing I can tell is different about them is that their soul is a lot stronger than a normal monster's. It assumedly has much more determination than other monsters, not as much as humans, but enough so the soul persists after death for only a few moments. But what if this kind of biological lineage passing from one monster to their child isn't only something exclusive to boss monsters, but all monsters? All it needs to change is that a normal monster is to be given a little bit more determination. As we know, determination injected into the body would probably affect the soul of the monster as well, due to the established fact that the monster's bodies and their souls are essentially linked together. So, if a body is injected with determination, say just a normal monster, and that monster has a child, that child would inherit that parent's determination, right? And what would happen to the parent monster's body once all the determination in their soul is gone? Does that scant physicality still have some of it left, or do they turn to dust?
That's it, I've had enough. Socky, what the hell are you talking about? This started with Snowdrake's mum falling down, then it went to the True Lab amalgams and you said you'd become transfixed on the experiments Alphys did and when they happened, and what the families of the amalgams are doing now, and then timelines and game stat analysis. Now you're talking about goners and mpreg, and just tell us what this video is about. It's been more than half an hour. I want to know what this is about. I have gooning to take care of, so I want the truth. What do you want to tell us? Why did you torture Sans near to death? Why?
Well, you know the fridges.
Yeah.
You know how some of them have samples in them?
Yeah.
I think I know what the samples are of a little.
What?
The graves in Deltarune.
What about the graves in Deltarune?
I think I know why they exist.
I'm gonna call the fucking police.
All of this so far is primer for that, but everything I've got to say, I think there's something wrong with me. I'm going to try to explain myself in order from sane to insane, horseshoeing back to some kind of smooth/gigabrain conspiracy. Welcome to a little section I like to call confirmation bias. Right, that was unnecessary. But anyway, timeline recap. In my theory, the timeline is this. Gaster does experiments, they are determination experiments that don't go haywire, he makes a few immortal creatures, doesn't get the results he wants, and then vanishes after another experiment. Many years later, Shiren's sister falls down, and Snowdrake's mother falls down. This time frame coincides with an engineer named Alphys building a robot who she says has a soul called Metaton, though we know it's actually Habstabluke inhabiting that robot. This gets her made royal scientist immediately by Asgore, and she's tasked with breaking the barrier. She eventually discovers determination and injects it into monsters. Metaton becomes famous, and eventually Alphys' experiments fail after she thought that she brought some monsters back from the dead, but they eventually start melting. From here, a few years pass, around 6 to 10 years, in which Alphys hides from the worlds and all of her mistakes that she's done, venturing out only to hang around the garbage dump, in which she meets Undyne. So what's in the fridges? First of all, there's something I need to get out of the way. These fridges are either empty or filled with samples. From left to right, they are consecutively empty and then full of samples. Now, the question then arises, what are the samples of? Well, we just need to think logically. What experiments do we know of for sure happened here in the True Lab? While speculation can be cast as to any other experiments that happened, like how I believe Entry 17 was an experiment done somewhere else in the lab, separate from the determination experiments, we best only go with what we know for sure happened, and that was the determination experiments. So think of what made up those experiments, as in what was materially involved. Flowers, monsters, amalgams, human souls, determination, and a scientist. Now we know all of these things can't fit into a fridge as a sample, except Snowdrake's mother of course, but she was a fridge, not in the fridge. So think about the idea of refrigeration. Why would these things that were samples need to be refrigerated or frozen? Well, again, we need to take a logical deduction here. Refrigeration is normally used to keep biological material from degrading, rotting, developing mold, etc. You get the idea. That means these samples are probably some sort of biological material that needed to be frozen or refrigerated as they are a byproduct or a result of the experiments. We can assume that these samples aren't very large, maybe beakers of stuff, petri dishes, or maybe plastic tubs full of things. As the fridges state, there are multiple samples in the fridges that have samples within them, meaning they'd need to be small enough to fit in the fridges with multiple other samples. The word sample itself denotes a lack of an entirety as well, as in these samples are merely a small portion of something that was greater. It's not the amalgams, again ignore Snowdrake's mother for now, she's a special case. Mostly, they're out and about roaming around the lab. It's not frozen monsters, as the fridges are far too small to contain multiple bodies of still living but frozen monsters. It's not the souls, as we know the souls are hidden by Asgore by the barrier, and it's probably not the flowers, as we see that the flowers are all set out on the table in the mirror room, and those that are set out are the control cases of the flowers mentioned in the lab's entries. There may have been cuttings taken from these flowers that were possibly refrigerated, who knows, but the idea of a control case gives me pause, as it should for you as well. What did Alphys inject with determination other than the flower she wanted to be a vessel for the souls? The fallen monsters, of course. She wanted their souls. However, if you were to have control cases for the flowers, as you don't know what to expect in these determination experiments, then it stands to reason that you'd have control cases for the monsters' bodies as well. And what happens when a fallen monster without determination injected into their body eventually dies? They dissolve. They turn into dust. Remember, at the start of the experiments, Alphys always expected the monsters to die and then give the dust back to the families for the funerals. She just wanted the souls. She was already assuming she would be collecting a bunch of dust, and since time was no issue for Alphys, she didn't have to make every corpse count, so why not have control case monsters as well, and then compare those bodies to the injected cases? But that's not all. Remember back, each amalgam is made up from monsters from the same biome. 5 different amalgams, 5 different fridges, 5 different biomes. All the amalgams are made up from specific monsters from a specific biome. Then, remember, 5 different fridges containing samples. You see what I'm getting at here? The samples are the biological leavings of departed monsters. They are samples of the monster's dust, of those departed monsters, and each fridge probably contains or contained dust of monsters from a single region. One fridge for Snowdon, one fridge for Waterfall, etc. You get me. So at least at the beginning of the experiments, before she made a bunch of amalgams, she was always intending to give dust back to the families, so she would have to store that dust. And since it's presumably been years since she's become royal scientist, we can assume she didn't immediately discover determination as well, meaning more than likely some of the monster bodies that she would have received at the start would have perished early on in her experimentation, before she found determination. This time frame, along with the correlation of the 5 fridge, 5 amalgam, 5 biome, it seems clear to me that these fridges stored said dust of those monsters. But why are some of the fridges empty? This is where we start getting more insane. I think I know why at least one of the fridges are empty, and not a fridge. If these fridges contained dust, assumedly containing the dust of creatures from separate biomes, as in the fridges were segregated to have only dust of monsters from a specific biome, then of the 5 fridges, why did only 2 of the fridges have samples in them? And why was one Snowdrake's mum? Brace yourself, because this is going to get wild. During her mad panic, the experiments not panning out the way that she wanted them to, Alfie states in entry 12 that she doesn't know what to do, and that she'll keep injecting everything with determination. Now, dear listener, the bodies aren't dying or waking up. Her flower is no different from the control cases. She also needs a vessel. That's paramount. So why not inject determination into something that once held a soul? Seems like a better shot than just a random flower, right? Remember, she says she's literally injecting everything with determination. Maybe also some monster dust. Now this is big, so I'm just going to start writing and hope for the best. We have 5 amalgams, however I'm taking Memory Head and Doggo out of the equation for reasons I'll explain in a bit. That leaves Snowdrake's mum, Reaperbird and Lemonbread. Now remember, Shiren's sister is part of Lemonbread and Snowdrake's mum is Snowdrake's mum mixed with 16 other people according to the Drake family in the prologue. But in any case, we know they both fell down prior to Alfie's becoming royal scientist. This means they were either very early determination subjects, somehow not perishing into dust prior to Alfie's experiments and then injected with determination Alfie's must have already had somehow, or the dust was given to Alfie after she had become royal scientist, after Snowdrake's mum and Shiren had already died. I don't know why their dust was given to Alfie's, but I assume science? Maybe something to do with being control cases. Also, adding validity to my speculation that Snowdrake's mum, and to some degree Shiren's sister, was possibly already dust before being in the lab, look at what Snowdrake's dad says about his wife. Before the prologue, he says Snowdrake ran away from home after his mother passed on. And during the prologue, he states that the doctor brought his wife back from the dead. Notice in neither of those statements did he say his wife had fallen down or was comatose or taken by the doctor. Falling down is a term monsters do use, as we know Mettaton describes Shiren's sister that way, so why didn't Snowdrake's father say that about his wife? It's presumably because his wife was already dead and dust by the time the experiments were happening. Again, I don't know why their dust was given, but science? If they were both dust, Snowdrake's mum and Shiren, how are they amalgams now? And that's simple. If we use my fridge dust injected with determination speculation, then Alfie's injected their dust and maybe others with determination. What does determination do? It determinates for one, causing life, and 2, it also causes the dust, in this case biological matter with the essence of a past soul imbued into it, to amalgamate into its prior form. And if they are put into the fridges after the injection, allowed to cook for a while with other monster dust, all monster dust from a specific biome, voila! An amalgam made from all the monsters of a specific area. Snowdrake's mum isn't losing herself to the whims of other monsters' souls within her. She's losing herself the same way Flowey lost what part of them was Azrael. Like Flowey, Snowdrake's mum is technically a goner. She's not melting in my opinion, but reforming. I have more thoughts on that specific reforming process, and I'll talk about that a bit later, but let's ask this question. How was Snowdrake's mum a fridge? How does that work? Well, look at Omega Flowey's battle sprite. Within them we see the TV presumably from the True Lab and pipes reminiscent of the True Lab elevator power room. This shows that it's not impossible for an amalgam to incorporate non-living matter into itself, or maybe just make its form appear to be a certain object. Also, there is the crazy possibility I left on the table earlier about the True Lab being alive, but that's unconfirmed. But also, you see the displays on the walls in the fridge room? They talk of the families of the fallen monsters, as well as Asgore, asking when their loved ones are coming home. In my writing on the wall video, I theorised that the relevance of these displays being here is because Alfie's felt cold and alone vis-a-vis the fridges. But if the fridges are filled with the dusty remains of family members, then that's a direct correlation to the information on the displays with the contents of the fridges. It could work. Anyway, I believe this explains how Snowdrake's mum exists given her timeline of falling down around when Alphys first became royal scientist, and possibly also how Lemonbread exists with Sharon's sister, and to that end maybe also Reaperbird. They are dust of multiple monsters from the same area combined together to make some form of hybrid goner monster, or at least Snowdrake's mum is. But what about Memoryhead and Endogeny? Well, guess what? I've not even begun to go insane. So backing up and answering what I asked previously, why are there 5 fridges with only 2 of them containing samples? Samples we assume to be monster dust. Well, we know why one of the fridges, Snowdrake's mum, was empty. She was the fridge, and presumably every other monster within it. But what about the other 4, the ones that seem to be actually fridges? Well, if there are fridges that still have samples in them versus fridges that don't have samples in them, then we can only come to the conclusion that some of the fridges, the ones without samples in them, had once contained dust that was injected with determination inside of them. That dust then came to life and became an amalgam, and that goner amalgam is now loose in the lab somewhere. So the question now is, which of the amalgams are goners and which ones have a soul? Or, in an amalgam's case, multiple souls. Remember, how can you tell when a monster is a goner? If they're grey or not. Which amalgams are grey? All of them. While in the true lab, that is, you see there is one amalgam that isn't grey. Endogeny. Endogeny, once above ground in Snowdon, has a white colour palette, meaning the greyness that affected them in the true lab was only due to the dank atmosphere of the lab. Once outside, their true colours shine. And if we look at the texture sheet that their sprite and all the other amalgam sprites are a part of, we see that they have 2 distinct sprites. One for above ground and one for the true lab. But here's the thing, none of the other amalgams have a changed palette sprite. This means that either they are all goners, or that maybe at least one of them didn't get a coloured sprite since they didn't reappear in the prologue. After all, we only see Snowdrake's mother, Endogeny, and Lemonbread in the prologue as amalgams. Memoryhead and Reaperbird don't make an appearance. Snowdrake's mother and Sharon's sister are both grey above ground, and being that they likely fell down before Alfie's experiments, I'm making them goners. And Endogeny is white, so I'll say that he's an amalgam of monsters that were still alive and not dust when they were injected with determination. It makes sense that Endogeny is not soulless, as remember, the guard dogs are the only family with people they care about in the true lab that still actually care about what's happening with their parents and what the go with that is. Remember? This implies that they were expecting their parents back alive and not just as dust, implying they gave bodies and expected living bodies in return. Correlate that with what Doggeressa says about Alphys and yeah, they're expecting their loved ones back alive. That leaves Memoryhead and Reaperbird. Now I believe Reaperbird to be the other amalgam that isn't a goner since Memoryhead is so obviously a phone. I mean, obviously. Once again, entry 12, Alphys injected everything with determination. I'm not putting a phone past her. And I also have some strange correlating notes from a time before Undertale was created, from the man himself. You see, these notes show that Memoryhead may be monsters and or technology from the ruins. You don't see it? What about now? No? What about now? What if I do this? You know what, let's clear it all up and there. See? Dr. Alphys is the creator of the technology in the ruins. He just uses his magical powers with the composition of something and puts together metals. The magic of the ruins then take over and gives the mechanisms power. Probably a mad scientist type, but not the girl character. Not looking for anything serious. General structure. You see, the implication here is that Memoryhead, being possibly correlated with the ruins as their origin point, was created by Alphys or was intended to originally be a magical mechanism. Obviously, retcons have happened since. Alphys is a she, not a he. She uses engineering to make stuff not magic, and the ruins have been sealed for years, and Alphys was shocked that the Queen was still alive at the end of Undertale, implying she's never met the Queen before, meaning she's never been inside of the ruins before, as well as a lack of her cameras being in the ruins pointing to her lack of knowledge of the area. But anyway, I reckon Memory Head is a phone that was injected by Alphys that may have amalgamated onto some monster dust from the monsters in the ruins. I mean, if you look at the eyes on the faces of Memory Head, they kinda look like Froggett's, Whimsun and Migsop's eyes, but that's entirely speculation. What we do know is that Alphys experimented with souls and phones before. On her work table, on level 2 of the lab, we can see some very interesting blueprints. Make of them what you will for now. There's also the possibility of another amalgam that is hiding from us that may also have a soul, but that's unconfirmed. It is possible that all amalgams aside from Endogeny are goners due to them not having a coloured palette in the texture sheet. When we are accosted by the amalgams in the power room, there are 4 amalgams that advance on us, possibly smelling the chips on our person if we had any in our inventory. This may be all 4 amalgams that we've met so far, sans Endogeny. Correlating with that, upstairs there is a dog food bag that is used especially to feed Endogeny, assumedly. This implies that all the other amalgams eat something else. I wonder if the chips are magical or physical. What would only a body without a soul be able to eat? Why can they smell the chips from the True Lab but none of our other magical food items? And why does Alphys and Papyrus use the excuse that they need to go to the bathroom, yet monsters have no need for bathrooms according to the food monster at Grillby's? Stop, Socky! It's another video. So let's summarise that last 15 minutes. I believe that at least Snowdrake's mother is a goner, a vessel without a soul, with the added possibility that every other amalgam are also goners except for Doggo due to Doggo's colour palette, above ground and family members still provably caring about them coming home prior to the prologue. Also, my own pet theory that these 2 dogs are in some way in the know as to the determination experiments happening in the True Lab adds to the suspicion that they already knew what Alphys could do and would bring back their parents from falling down. I also accept the possibility that due to 2 of the fridges still having samples in them, that there may be 2 amalgams that aren't goners and 3 that are. If that is the case, at the moment I believe the amalgams that have souls are Doggo and Reaper Bird, being that since I also believe Memory Head to be a phone injected with determination and mixed with dusts from monsters from the ruins, that would leave them as the obvious goner and Reaper Bird as the remaining soul-filled amalgam. Snowdrake's mother and Lemon Bread are goners due to the time frame in which Shiram's sister and Snowdrake's mother fell down, and the grey colour palettes that remain when above ground, implying they have no soul. That's the first bout of crazy out of the way. Now let's move on to my psychosis. I've talked about this before, but you ever wonder what makes something human? Well, if a soul's power and determination dictate the form of monsters, there's a possibility that a human soul would work in the same way. But if you inject a human's determination into a monster, what happens to that monster's body? What is human determination versus monster determination? Should a corpse be injected with determination and that corpse has no determination of its own flowing from its own soul to counter or blend with the new injection of human determination, we must assume that the corpse's form and the way that they would emote would change to be more human. Let's assume for this theory that all amalgams aside from Doggo are goners. Memory Head. There's the cerebral nature of this spine-like growth, stemming from the head-shaped, face-filled mass, evokes the idea of the humanoid. This is coupled with the humanoid faces that are used as their attacks during the fight. It's like a phone was injected with human determination, and, being that smartphones at least, the ones that Alphys are so fond of, are a type of computer, Memory Head seems to be becoming a kind of brain with humanoid features. Reaper Bird. While Reaper Bird and Memory Head's overworld sprites don't evoke the idea of the humanoid, the battle sprites of Reaper Bird does. Astigmatism has become the head, Final Frogget its torso and arms, and Whimsalot its legs, but longer. They're amalgamated to become humanoid as opposed to anything else. Combine this with their attack, once again, like with Memory Head, attacks must assumedly be an emotional display reminiscent of the personality of said monster, and that personality is made up of the soul, or remnant of soul. Reaper Bird attacks with every man, quite literally a humanoid creature described as a man. Then we have Lemon Bread. Their in-battle sprite hasn't changed too much from the non-humanoid, though you could say it's slightly upright and becoming at least mermaid-ish. Its overworld sprite is that of a lanky humanoid creature, and it attacks with what can be seen to be a human face. Again, the Gunstar Hero references put aside. But then we have Snowdrake's mum, the one that I really do believe to be a goner, and one that I really do think is becoming more humanoid, though not as apparent. Her overworld sprite is obviously humanoid, but there are subtle changes to her in-battle sprite that aren't so apparent. Yes, her eyes have been replaced with faces that could be said to be humanoid, that's obvious, but then there's the more subtle differences. Her snowflake on her face is turning into a human. You got 5 fingers on each hand. A face seems to be appearing at the top, and Snowdrake's mother's legs, in general, are getting closer together. Less chicken-like and more person-like. Doggo, being that I think they are an actual amalgam of still living souls, doesn't amalgamate any human traits, as they have the power of the souls of the dog guard parents to counteract it, though the dog's form still does change to become more like the concept of a bunch of dogs rather than the individual dog monster they once were. And then there's Flowey. How do human souls affect him? Yes, when they absorb every soul in the underground, they turn back into Azrael, as opposed to some mega-human plant hybrid amalgam you would expect based off my theory. But you have to remember that he absorbed thousands of other monster souls as well. His reforming into Azrael probably had something to do with that. But in the neutral route, when he absorbs all the human souls exclusively, he turns into some mega-human plant hybrid amalgam, with human hands and eyes and teeth and a human face that appears on the TV that's embedded into him. But now I think about powerful souls filled with determination and getting pregnant. Let's wrap this up soon, I'm having an aneurysm. So remember when I mentioned the graves in Deltarune? Well, if we know what happens to a monster when they die, then why would a grave be necessary for them after death? What body would exist to be buried? First of all, who do the graves belong to? And you'll never guess who. Snowdrake's mum, Shiren's sister, in my opinion, some form of dog monster, again in my opinion, I'll explain later, and Gerson, who I previously theorized to be part of Gaster's earlier determination experiments. So, what do we know causes a body to still exist even after a soul has left its body? Determination. And what causes the soul to leave the body of a monster with heightened amounts of determination, making them a goner? Well, the soul somehow being extracted, destroyed, or that monster having a child. As I've explained earlier, a monster's soul power drains from their child as they age, so I thought if this isn't exclusive to boss monsters, that may mean amalgams, the ones that aren't goners, may have their soul power flow into their children. But what would that mean if every monster with an amalgam parent gets soul power from each of the amalgam's constituent monsters? That would mean the soul of each child of the amalgams would be changed by their parent's soul power that is flowing into them. How would this be reflected in Deltarune if we assume that Deltarune is somehow a sequel to Undertale? Let's head to the speculation zone and end all of this. Right, we're finally here. The best way I can describe my theory is this. Strong immortal monsters have strong immortal children. Those monsters with heightened determination in their souls will in turn pass that power onto their children no matter what. If a monster is injected with determination, their symbiotic relation with their soul allows their body and souls to share that determination assumedly. Whether or not this reaction is entropic over generations of monsters is immaterial. This implies that Alvin, as an old turtle, also may have a child of his own if being the son of Gerson means he has a heightened amount of determination in his soul, and as Asgore explains in the now defunct alarm clock dialogue that Toby was going to release, Rudy, Asgore's friend and assumedly Noel's dad in Deltarune, grew older with time as Asgore did not. Which means that since Alvin is old, and may possibly have heightened levels of determination in his body which should prevent his aging, his age implies he has a child of his own. Rudy then had a child. Asgore didn't. Rudy started getting older. They'll grow up in the sun. Monsters aren't experienced with illness. They don't get sick. This means that Alvin would not grow old unless he had a child. But what about the other monsters? let's talk about Mutler. We must assume that this grave belongs to a dog. And here's the thing, it could be any one of these dogs. You see, if all of their parents were merged together to be androgyny, then all of them would have parts of the soul power that their parents had. That means they'd all have a heightened sense of determination in their bodies. That means they mightn't leave a corpse when they die. But if I were a betting man, I'd assume Mutler to be the name of androgyny, a name the children gave the parents. As the grave states, they were the leader of a pack. Pack implies multiple dogs, multiple children. You see what I mean? There's also the possibility that the grave belongs to Dogamy and or Doggeressa, as since they have every one of the dog's parents' soul power flowing into them, and that means that their children would also reflect that attribute, as in all their kids would look like all the other guard dogs if they were to have kids. And if we look at who's in jail, oh look! Young dogs of every flavour of guard dog. This theory could be true no matter who's in the grave though, and I do genuinely think androgyny is the one in the grave. But why is Snowdrake's mother, known here as Crystal, dead as well if she had no soul to have power flow out of? Well, there are two possibilities. Either she was killed literally in the physical sense, her body damaged until she stopped moving, just like real life. Or she did have a soul, and I'm wrong about her completely. Or she didn't have a soul in Undertale, but does in Deltarune, as these worlds and universes are only superficially connected, and all this speculation is for nothing. We know her child is Snowdrake, and they don't look any different, which implies that his mother doesn't have a soul, as Snowdrake doesn't seem to be showing any of the attributes of the 16 other people she was supposedly merged with. So basically, I don't know. But Shira being dead also implies that they had a child as well. Shira is assumedly the name of Shiren's sister, as the graves all seem to have the theme of determination experiment subjects, and it would be poor form of Toby just to rename a character arbitrarily. There's also the fact that the graves seem to physically represent the attributes of the monsters buried underneath them. Gerson has a shell or a hammer shaped gravestone, Snowdrake's mum has a snowflake/gem theme, Androgyny's makes sense because how do you represent multiple monsters fused together and not show favoritism? You just use a basic stone. And Shira's grave is a crescent moon or slug-like shape, resembling how Shiren's sister looks much more than Shiren herself. This next bit could go for Snowdrake's mum as well, but as an amalgam, you may not have to have the original soul of the original monster to pass soul power down to the child of that said monster. Remember a monster's symbiotic relationship between soul and body. Shira's and Snowdrake's mother's dust may have had enough essence of them in it to essentially make the souls that their dust is a part of change to become essentially the new parent of that child. You know what, in Undertale and Deltarune, let's just assume all the amalgams had souls, because I just can't think at the moment. Anyone in chat, let me know what's more likely, soul yes or soul no. So, Mutler's children? All the dogs essentially. Crystal's children? Snowdrake. Shira's child? Who would that be? I said before that it's implied that she must have a child if she's dead. Well, in both Undertale and Deltarune, we'd have to make an educated guess. The child would have to be musically talented, confident if they were the daughter of an agent, fish-like. In Undertale, they would have had to have lived in Waterfall, with also an unexplained amount of determination in their body. I wonder who that might be. Notice how both Shiren and her have the same eye covered, and also the same hair and fin sameness. My sister looks like her auntie as well. But anyway, those are the graves. But what about the other amalgams? Memoryhead and Reaper Bird. They don't have graves. Well, Memoryhead, I have literally no idea what happened to them after Undertale, but if they are related to the monsters in the ruins, then in Deltarune, look out for a Frogget or a Whimsun or a Mixop that has good cell phone coverage. It may be a hint that Memoryhead may have had a child. As for Reaper Bird, well, their child would have to be bipedal, like Reaper Bird, bird-like, have the arrogance of astigmatism, the self-assurance of Final Frogget, and the drive of Whimsalot. Any characters like that? No, that's just insane. Anyway, called shot here. One day these graves will open and the bodies will just start walking around freely. That or a dark world will be opened here, Halloween themed, and the enemies we will fight will be the goners of these monsters. I don't know how to end this, I never really had an end. Oh, why'd I beat the crap out of Sans during the beginning? Because he's hiding the truth. They both are. The truth of this world. Bye-bye.